give you a quick legal update, and then Robert, my colleague, is going to finish it off because Prop 19 obviously is part of a legal update. And it's actually, you're very lucky to have Robert here today because Robert actually knows more than I do about the stuff I'm talking about. So he'll be able to answer your questions. He's sort of our expert on a lot of these things, and he drafts most of our legal Q&As that we have, that I'll probably be referring to today for you to know about. All right, so what do you really need to know about as a realtor this year? I think there are three big things. I'm going to talk about two of them, and Robert's going to talk about the other one. The two I'm going to talk about is a new disclosure law and also the continuing rules on evictions and state rental assistance. Before I even go there, though, I know what everyone really wants to know about is COVID. When are the rules going to change? The governor just announced on June 15th, pretty much on June 15th, we're not even going to have to worry about tiers anymore. We're going to be more or less open. So of course, the response from the real estate community is naturally, oh, great, how does that affect us? When can we do traditional open houses? When can we dispense with these cleaning protocols? When do I stop using the PED form and all that? And the answer is nobody knows yet. As of now, nothing has changed. We're under the same rules we've been in for many months. We are scheduling a meeting, the higher ups at CR with the governor's office and the California Department of Public Health. We have a meeting scheduled. We're going to talk about this stuff and hopefully some changes are coming, but nothing has happened yet. You still can't do open houses the traditional way. You still have the cleaning protocols, one buying party at a time, wear the masks, the PED form, posted rules of entry. All of the things that have been true for the last many, many months are still true right now, but just stay tuned, okay? Stay tuned for changes that will be coming. They're just not they just haven't come yet, and no one knows the exact schedule or anything like that, okay? Actually, there's one sort of new thing about COVID this year. There's a law called California AB 685, and my colleague Robert Bloom did a nice little Q&A about that, called Notification to Employees about Potential Exposure to COVID. Let's say your real estate office is open, which is okay. You're allowed to do that, essential workers. But let's say someone who works in the office tests positive. Who's ever in charge of the office, and this applies to all work sites, not just real estate offices, but who's ever in charge of the work site has to notify in writing by the end of the next business day anyone else who was at the work site, basically during this person's who just tested positive, possible infectious period. And if we're talking about employees as opposed to independent contractors, there are special things you must put in this written notification. Please check out the Q&A. We have California AB 685, notification to employees. It gives you a nice little template on what exactly you're supposed to put in that written notification. And of course, you still have to keep track of the people who come into your office, right? You still have to worry about the contact tracing. Some outside person comes into your office, you have to sort of register them, screen them, make a record that they were there, because what if they test positive? You have an obligation to figure out who else was in the office around that time, outside people, and make a good faith effort to notify them that, hey, you were potentially exposed when you were in my office. Okay, so none of that has changed. I think we're moving towards change. We're definitely moving towards change, but right now nothing has changed. And there's this one new thing, okay? So let's talk about the big laws everyone needs to know about. Robert's gonna talk about Prop 19, perhaps the biggest one. The other two really big ones that everyone should know about is that there's a new disclosure law now, the Home Fire Hardening Disclosure Law, which actually results in a new disclosure form. This is big news. There hasn't been a mandatory disclosure form that's been required when you sell houses in California for a long time. For the last many years, you've basically been ordering an NHD report and then worrying about the TDS, the seller property questionnaire, the lead paint form, if it's pre-78, and then the disclosure booklets. Generally, I sort of shorthand refer to it as NHD +4, right? TDS, SPQ, booklets, and lead paint. Well, now there's a fifth one, a big one. Every time you take a listing now, you have to determine if the house you have are listed if you're listing 1 to 4, is it in a very high or high fire hazard severity zone? And number 2, if so, is it built before 2010? If both of those things are true, very high or high and built before 2010, this is a mandatory form, the HHDA, which must be completed, the seller has 6 questions they have to respond to, and then it must be delivered just like any other disclosure, just like the TDS. If you're exempt from the TDS, probate, REO, et cetera, you're exempt from this. But this form is not required every single deal like a TDS is. It's required if it's pre-2010 home built in a high or very high fire hazard severity zone. Do you know in California, basically, you're either in a very high, high, moderate, or no zone at all. If you're not in a zone at all, you're in a moderate zone, you don't need this form. You're in a high or very high, you need this form if it's a pre-2010 home. How do I figure out if I'm in a high or a very high? You first look at the standard NHD report. It lists 2 fire zones there: very high fire severity and wildland fire areas subject to substantial forest fire risks. Clearly, if the very high box is checked, you're in a very high zone. The form is required if it's a pre-2010 home. What if that box isn't checked, but the wildland fire area subject to substantial fire risk box is checked? Then you don't know for sure what zone you're in. So you must go another step and basically talk to your NHD reps, and you have very good ones there, and they'll be able to tell you whether you're in a moderate or a high. There's nothing wrong with providing the form if you're only in a moderate zone. In fact, if you're in an area that's susceptible to wildfires, you should probably disclose that even if you don't happen to be in a zone. And on this form itself, there's actually a checkbox. You can check the box saying the property is not in a high or very high fire zone. So it's actually anticipated that you might provide this form if you're not in a very high or high fire hazard zone. But it's required if you're in the high or very high. Your wonderful NHD rep is going to tell you if you're in the high or very high. One of them is raising her hand over there, I see, Carolyn. So you know what? You know how to get this information. Once you find that out, you figure out how old the house is, pre-2010, provide the form, make sure the seller answers the 6 questions to the best of their knowledge regarding, they have to disclose, in other words, if they have a wood roof or single pane windows rather than dual pane, or combustible landscaping within 5 feet of the property. The reason the form is not required on a sale of a home built after 2010 is because those homes were built under the new fire building code, where it can't have wood roof. It must have dual pane windows. It can't have combustible. So the form isn't really necessary. This is for people who are buying a home in the dangerous area, and the home might have some features that make it less safe than it could be. This is not a retrofit requirement. The seller doesn't have to change out their roof and take out their wood roof. All they have to do is disclose to the buyer, right? They have to disclose to the buyer these features. The buyer doesn't like it, the buyer doesn't have to buy the house. The seller doesn't have to upgrade the house, okay? A lot of confusion on this form. The last part refers to home fire hardening final inspection report. People keep asking me, where do I go get an inspector for a home hardening final inspection report? You don't need to do that as part of this transaction. Look what it says there. It says, if checked, the seller has obtained one. In other words, this is only relevant if the seller of the property already has one of these reports, which they probably would have obtained if they built the property or did a major remodel, in which case it would have been required to do some fire hardening to get the permit. So if the seller's in possession of one of those government issued final inspection reports, they're going to give it to the buyer. But some people have been reading this and say, oh my goodness, every time I'm selling a pre-2010 house in a fire zone, someone has to go out and do a fire inspection report. Not true. Okay. This is only if you've already got the report. All right. Okay. I think that's really all we really need to talk about this particular new law. If you have questions, ask Robert later. He knows more than me. Just kidding. You can put questions in the chat anytime you want. So that's big law number one. What's big law number two? Big law number two is SB 91, the extension of the eviction moratorium and also state rental assistance. My friend Robert did a very nice comprehensive Q&A on this called Eviction Moratorium Extension and State Rental Assistance Program, SB 91. It even has nice links to it in it that will help you. Bottom line is this, two things. Number one, the eviction moratorium was extended, as you know, till July 1st. The federal one was also extended. We don't care too much about that because we got the California one. I'll mention in a second the only thing you have to care about. What does this eviction moratorium do? Basically, first of all, it extends to July the fact that when you do send eviction notices, please use the COVID eviction forms, not the regular ones. It also extends the fact that residential tenants who cannot afford to pay rent because of COVID and are willing to sign a declaration under penalty of perjury to that fact don't have to pay their full rent until July. They only have to pay 25%. What if they don't pay 25%? You can evict them in July. What if they do pay the 25%? Can I evict them in July for not paying the other 75%? No, you can never evict them for that. You can only sue them for the money. Starting in July, you can do that. Starting in August, you can sue them in small claims. What if the tenant is not paying rent, but it's got nothing to do with COVID? You can evict them right now. The courts, of course, are backed up. Remember how long they were closed? You hear that report about that family in Riverside? They bought a house and the seller won't leave and they're having trouble evicting them. They're not having trouble evicting them because that seller has some COVID excuse not to leave. They're having trouble evicting them because the courts are so backed up because they were closed completely, remember, for a long time. Anyway, that's the reason with that. That seller in that particular case has no right not to leave, but it's a question of time. But anyway, assuming you can get the eviction done, if they're not paying rent and they don't have a COVID reason, you can evict them right now. How do I know what reason they have? The only way to find out is to actually send them the 15-day COVID eviction form. Attached to it is the declaration of financial distress, that if they return that within 15 days, they're telling you I have a COVID reason, you can't touch me till July. If they don't sign that form within 15 days, they're basically saying, go ahead and evict me now. Assuming you can do that, it may take time, but you have the right to do it. What if the tenant, they're not a question of paying rent, they're violating some other term of the lease, they're nuisance, criminal activity, subtenants without permission, damaging the property, they have pets they shouldn't have, they're not allowing you to show. You can evict them right now in Ventura County. In LA County, you're gonna have a problem. Most of those reasons I gave you are not still legitimate reasons to evict in LA County. But in Ventura County, absolutely. They're violating one of these other non-monetary terms of the lease. You can evict them right now. But make sure you use the proper COVID notice to cure breach of covenant or quit rather than the regular one. We have information on all this for you to get. Okay, what about the tenant? I want to sell the house. There's a tenant in the house. They're not doing anything wrong. They're paying the rent, but I want to sell the house. Can I kick them out so I can sell the house? Normally, I'd say a single family home exempt from California rent control. You don't even need a reason. Until July, though, in California, all properties, including single family, if you want to evict them for no fault, you can only do this for 4 reasons. One of them is owner wants to move in yourself. Owner, parent, grandparent, child, grandchild. Number 2, you're going to take the house completely off the rental market and not rent it to anyone. But that means probably at least 2 years you can't rent it out. Number 3, if it's a mandatory necessary remodel for health and safety reasons, you can kick them out. What if I just want to fix up the property in preparation of sale? Can I kick them out for that reason? No. However, fortunately, there's a fourth legitimate reason for no fault you can evict a tenant right now, and that is single family home. You get a buyer who signs a purchase contract saying they're going to live there, and the seller accepts that offer. As soon as that offer is accepted, you can give that tenant 30 or 60-day notice to vacate, assuming they're not still on a lease, right? You got to wait till the end of the lease. But you can evict in Ventura County for no fault for those four reasons. In LA County, you cannot. No fault evictions are still not allowed in LA County right now till July. By the way, any of these things might get extended, as you know. We hope not. We'll see what happens. That's the latest on that, okay? Angelica, for sale listing, tenant is present. Yeah, you sent them the COVID notice to terminate. The NTT, I don't have it with me, the exact name of the form, but there's a COVID version for all of these forms. So the COVID NTT is the form you're going to use, but you can't remember, give it, thank you, Robert, NTT CTRA. You can't give them the form until you have the buyer in contract. One more thing, there's a mandatory new disclosure form. The NTRA 2, if you are a landlord with a tenant behind in the rent for COVID reasons, you must give them this disclosure form. You should have done it already, better late than never. There was a form, remember a year ago, the NTRA 1, or it was actually called just the NTRA. Now there's the NTRA 2. Mandatory disclosure from landlords to tenants for tenants behind in the rent because of COVID. So I've told you two very important new forms, the HHDA, the mandatory home fire hardening disclosure form that must be provided on when you're selling a pre-2010 home in a very high or high fire hazard severity zone, and the NTRA 2, which must be given to all tenants behind in their COVID rent. Okay. The only other forms issues, of course, are all these COVID forms keep changing because they have to change. So all these COVID eviction forms recently were tweaked. Make sure you're using, of course, if you're using zip form, you're using the updated version. But as far as brand new forms, those are the only two. Plus the Fair Housing Advisory, which came out a few months ago, which is attached, bundled with your purchase contract and listing forms and residential lease forms and buyer broker contracts. So there's sort of three new forms and tweaks to several other forms, okay? By the way, the other part of this law, the positive part for landlords, is the rental assistance law. Of course, Robert created a nice handout for this one too, called the State Rental Assistance Law, in addition to the big Q&A called Eviction Moratorium and State Rental Assistance. Basically, you go to a website, housingiskey.com, follow the directions for your county, and if you're eligible, a landlord might be able to get government money to compensate you for the back rent that your tenant owes you because of COVID. In other words, now there are some restrictions. Eligible tenants that the landlord is entitled to get the rental assistance for means their income, the tenant household income has to be 80%, no more than 80% of the area median income. There's a link on this wonderful Q&A that will enable you to figure out Ventura County's area median income, for example, for a household of 3 or something like that. Whatever number that is, the tenant in question who's behind in their rent has to be making less than that. If that tenant is eligible, though, that landlord should be eligible to go to fill out the application, and the government's going to say, oh, the tenant owes you $20,000. We're going to give you $16,000. Why aren't you going to give me 20? Because if you want this money, we're only going to give you 80% of what's owed you. You have to forgive the other 20. What if I don't want to forgive the other 20? Well, then we're not going to give you anything. We'll take that back. The tenant will be able to apply to get 25% to pay for their minimum. So it's sort of like strings attached to become an eligible tenant, strings attached to how much money you're going to get. Jerry, well, Robert, you can answer the questions in chat, but it's definitely, it's not a loan. It's money you get, okay? Remember the president signed a new stimulus law? More money is coming to California for landlords, but it's still going to be under these same restrictions under California law. By the way, starting May 1st, this new big stimulus bill also is going to result in mortgage assistance. Let's say someone who can't pay their mortgage in California for a COVID reason. Starting May 1st, there's going to be a federal program. There's money already allocated where you'll be able to apply and say, I've been unable to pay my mortgage for COVID reasons. I would like some assistance. Remember, in California right now, basically, if you have a COVID reason you can't pay your mortgage, you're generally entitled to forbearance. All California lenders have to sort of mirror what's offered under the federal lending programs as far as offering borrowers forbearance. You know what forbearance means? You don't have to pay me the money now, you can pay it later. Wouldn't it be nice though if you didn't have to pay that money ever, if you actually got government assistance for that? We don't have details for that one because no details are available, but May 1st, we should get details about that part of the federal money. So there's a lot going on, right? There is a lot going on. Check out our Q&A. It has links to find out all this information. Go to that website, Housing is Key, and figure out how to get that rental assistance. LA County, much stricter than anywhere else. No fault evictions, showing rules, only two clients and one agent at a time. I think some of you probably work in LA County though, and you know the rules are different and you got to stick to those rules. Ventura County is more under the general state rules, so just do that. And all of this, we are hoping fervently, and we're sort of optimistic, are going to be changing soon. Open house, perhaps, cleaning protocols, perhaps. I mean, if other businesses can open, why can't real estate open logically, right? So I think we're moving in that direction. You will find out. You're going to find out all sorts of things. You're going to find out changes in these rules. You're going to find out if any of the rental rules are going to be extended or not, or changed or modified. You're going to find out if Los Angeles County is going to change any of their rules. So you guys have been extremely flexible for the last 13 months. I would say continue to be flexible for the next few, and you should be okay. Pay attention when CAR sends you emails, because we try to email you when anything big happens. You are so lucky to have Robert today, because he's the real expert on, he's the COVID expert and the eviction expert and the Prop 19 expert all in one. He's shaking his head, but it's totally true. So as you can see, he's answering questions in the chat right now. As far as relocation assistance, it's very complicated. I'm so glad Robert's here. So basically, I think those are the big things I wanted you to know. One more thing real quick. Good news. If you live in an HOA, there's a new law that says HOAs basically have to allow at least 25% of the unit owners to rent out their property. And they can't put unreasonable restrictions on like who you rent to, other than they can prohibit short-term rentals. And I guess if it's a senior citizen complex, they could limit it to seniors, something like that. But they cannot have unreasonable restrictions, and they have to allow at least 25% of the people to rent out their property. At this point, I'm finished. And the other really important new law that everyone needs to know about is Prop 19. So I guess I'll send it back to Cher. I'll hang out for a while, but you have Robert in your, which you're very lucky to have.
Thank you. That was awesome. Thank you so much. You always make that a lot more fun than legal updates should be. Appreciate that. Next up, we have Robert Bloom, and you've all gotten a little taste of Robert and met him, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. He joined the California Association of Realtors in 2004 and is now senior counsel at CAR. He divides his time between writing and editing the legal Q&As, delivering presentations, and counseling agents on the member hotline, legal hotline. He received his bachelor's degree in economics from the University of California at Berkeley and a law degree from the law school at the University of Chicago. So without further ado, I'm going to ask you to take it away on Prop 19. And I know we got a lot of questions, so you probably have a lot of information to cover. Take it away, Robert.
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so let me share my screen because I can't do what Gov does and just sort of talk. So I have to share my screen. I rely on this crutch. So let's make sure I have it. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so wow, Gov, that was really good. It's unfortunate I have to go after you. So just for your information, I'm not going to be as exciting and funny as Gov. But anyway, I'll give it a shot. My name is Robert Bloom. I'm senior counsel with CAR, and I'm going to talk about Prop 19. But before I do that, there's a caveat, a basic disclaimer, and it's sort of the disclaimer is on the side of the screen as well. I am not a tax or estate planning expert, and the information in this presentation is general information. It's not intended as a substitute for individual legal advice, and the specific examples are only general examples. So any person that they should not rely on this information, but in fact should discuss the issue with their own tax advisor or attorney. Okay, so having given that disclaimer, I will talk about Prop 19. So Prop 19, it's actually fairly straightforward. What does it do? It takes the existing system, which allows tax portability within counties or even between certain counties. It takes this existing system and it extends it. So under Prop 19, a homeowner who's 55 or over, severely disabled person, or person whose home was destroyed by fire, they can transfer the taxable value of their primary residence to a replacement primary residence. They can do this anywhere in the state, regardless of the location, and regardless of the value of the replacement primary residence. So even if that replacement property value is greater, but if that happens, there must be an upward adjustment in the tax basis. And they can do this within 2 years of the sale of the original primary residence. So that's going to be 2 years either before the sale or 2 years after the sale, either way. And they can do this up to 3 times. The house was destroyed by fire, they can even do it more. This applies on or after April 1st, 2021. And I'm going to discuss what that date actually means a little later. So that's the black letter law. And this law is an improvement on the previous system. So here in this slide, I'm laying out the advantages that Prop 19 has over the previous rules under Prop 60 and Prop 90. So first off, Prop 19 allows this property tax portability anywhere in the state. So previously under Prop 60 and 90, it was limited to within the same county or between certain counties. In fact, there were only 10 counties which allowed for this inter-county transfer. I think Ventura is actually one of these counties, however. So because Ventura already has this benefit, at least on this point, Prop 19 might not have such a dramatic impact. But the second point is bigger. Prop 19 allows the transfer of a tax basis even if the property is of greater value. It doesn't have to be equal or lesser. And that was the previous law. And that equal or lesser thing could be a major point of frustration. That limitation created all sorts of complications in the transaction. Because if your property was of greater value, then you got nothing. So previously it was critical that the replacement property come in an equal or lesser value. So this point is really big because now the advice to a client is to buy the property that you want to buy. Buy the property you like. And if it comes in at greater value, then there will be a tax increase. The property tax basis will increase, but a relatively small one by comparison. And lastly, Prop 19, under Prop 19, you can transfer the tax basis up to 3 times. It's not just a one-time thing. Prop 90 and 60, you can do it one time, that was it. So those are the big advantages. I have a chart here, and the chart is just basically saying what I just said. So somebody has a mic on that's kind of making sounds there. Okay, so the chart form is just for reference. It's just to basically summarize what I just said. Now, one of the questions that comes up quite a bit is the April 1st deadline. So Prop 19 came into full effect on April 1st. So a property that closed where both the purchase and the sale occur on or after April 1st. These transactions will clearly qualify for Property 19 tax savings. So assuming all of the other criteria are met, no problem there. However, we are still in a bit of a transition period where a homeowner who closes on a sale or purchase prior to April 1st, and that homeowner, let's say, is now buying or selling into another property, then the question arises, does this homeowner whose purchase and sale of the property straddles the April 1st date, does this homeowner get the Prop 19 tax savings? And the answer is a definite maybe. It's a maybe. So that's the second bullet point. Implementing legislation could allow for this homeowner to take the Prop 19 tax, to get the Prop 19 tax savings. I'm actually, in my opinion, I think it's very likely, but we're going to go with maybe right now because it's a lot easier to explain maybe. So if you have a client in this situation, then you're jumping to the last bullet point on my screen, and that says, if an agent who has a client who wishes to obtain the tax benefits of Prop 19 for a transaction that closed prior to April 1st, the client should be encouraged to seek the advice of a California real estate attorney or tax advisor. So that's where you would be for this transition period sale, which straddles the April 1st deadline. And finally, if the sale and purchase both closed prior to April 1st, then that is unlikely that this homeowner will be eligible for the Prop 19 savings. But again, it's not definitive, and that person should be advised to speak to a California real estate attorney or tax advisor. Okay, so another issue is the equal or lesser value. Prop 19 says that if you buy a property of equal or lesser value, you can transfer your tax basis. But if you buy a property of greater value, then you can also transfer your tax basis, but it's a blended and increased tax basis. So this phrase, what does the phrase equal or lesser value mean? Okay, well, equal or lesser value, it had a particular meaning under the previous law, Prop 1690. And previously, equal or lesser value of the replacement property meant 105% if purchased within 1 year of the sale of the original property, or 110% if purchased within the second year after the sale of the original property. If either one of these things happened, then under the old law, the tax basis of the original principal residence could transfer to the replacement principal residence. Now, when I first gave this presentation a long time ago, like 3 months ago, I told people that this same definition would almost certainly apply to Prop 19 transfers. But then I saw the Board of Equalization's proposed implementing legislation. And then I saw the Board of Equalization's proposed regulations. And then I saw the Board of Equalization's forms, which have now been released. And guess what? They omit this definition entirely. So they're just going with the quote unquote plain meaning of equal or lesser value, despite the fact that this phrase has had a particular meaning for 35 years now. So it's just not clear what we're going to end up with. I mean, obviously, CAR is negotiating to keep the current definition, but the final answer is not clear, and we're going to have to await implementing legislation to clarify this issue. Well, so somebody asked, who makes the decision when the sale is straddling the April 1st deadline? I mean, if it closes, if one part of the transaction closes before April 1st and the other part closes on or after, then it's straddling. I mean, it's not much of a decision. Okay, so the next slide. The question here is, how do you determine the new tax basis? And there are two rules. So the first rule is simple. It reiterates that the original tax basis simply transfers when the replacement property is of equal or lesser value. Simple. Second rule is for when the replacement property is of greater value. And it's also pretty simple, but it does require a little bit of math. And the rule is that you transfer the tax basis, but you add to that the difference between the purchase price of the replacement property and the original property. So if it's greater, if the replacement property is of greater value, then I have this example. Suppose you have an original primary residence with a tax basis of 400,000. Suppose it sells for 900,000, but the replacement primary residence is $1 million. So that is of greater value than the original property. Now, under the old rule, you'd just be out of luck. You'd get nothing. Okay, but under Prop 19, you can do it. You just have to make the adjustment. And the new tax basis will be the 400,000 tax basis of the original, plus the 100,000 difference between the old and new property full cash values. And that equals 500,000. So 500,000 is the new tax basis. So this is a big advantage. Before you couldn't transfer you wouldn't get transfer the tax basis at all. And now the advice is go and find something you like. Oh, where are the forms to fill out and submit to the assessor? Good question, because that's the next slide. Okay, so I've explained who can qualify for Prop 19 tax savings, but there is one last final step. And to actually get the benefit, a claim must be filed with the county assessor within 3 years of the purchase of the replacement property. So what if you file after that? Well, you can still get the benefit, but you're missing out on some of the savings. So you're paying more than you really have to, and nobody wants to do that. And clients can be reminded to contact the county assessor to obtain the appropriate forms. So where would you get these forms? At the county assessor. Now, the BOE had these forms all ready to go. They sent them all out to the county assessors weeks ago, and most of the county assessors have in fact posted them already. And I've checked a few, and they all have them except for one county I saw which didn't. So I'm pretty sure Ventura is the kind of county that would have them up and ready to go. I think so. Pretty sure it is. I didn't check, but who knows? Okay, so that's how the portability part of Prop 19 works. And what I have here are some common questions that have come up more than a few times. So I've sort of, restated them, and we're just going to go through them. So the first one, if I purchase a property now and then move into it and use it as my principal residence, does that negate or undermine the idea that the sale of my original property is not my principal residence? Okay, and the answer is no, because you have to purchase the property within 2 years of the sale of your principal residence. So as long as you were living in that previous property within 2 years, then you're good. Okay. And the second question, do I have to sell my original property? Can I just transfer it to my son? So there's two questions, and the answer is no and no. So you have to sell the property. Otherwise, you don't get the benefit of transferring it. The original property has to, quote, undergo a change of ownership that subjects the property to reappraisal at the full cash value. And that's why the answer to the second question is also a no, because you transfer it to your son, that's an exemption. It's not going to be reappraised at the full cash value. So it's a no and a no. And third question, if I share title with another person on the replacement property, can I still get the exemption? And the answer there is yes. So what matters is if 100% of the replacement primary residence changed ownership. So it doesn't matter who else is joining you on title. And finally, what if the replacement property has a taxable basis that is less than the original? Do you have to transfer your tax basis? And the answer is no. It's an election. You can choose not to do it. So now all of these answers really are the same answers under current law, or at least, or were the same answers under the Prop 60 and Prop 90 rules. I mean, in general, most of the answers are simply, everything's going to remain the same. The Board of Equalization is not interested in completely changing up, you know, all of the answers to the existing rules. It's just that it hasn't been set in stone yet. So that's why you'll see in the after each answer, I've included subject to implementing legislation. I mean, it's not definitive, but that's going to be the answer. Okay, so that's the, all of that, everything I just talked about has to do with portability. That is, a person keeping their tax basis when they buy and sell and change into a new principal residence. So it's portability. And the next slides are about transfers to children and grandchildren. So previously, all transfers, and the rules have changed for this. So that's why this is important. So previously, all transfers of a principal residence to your children were exempt, regardless of how the children used the property. So the tax basis transferred when you transferred your principal residence to your children or grandchildren, it doesn't matter, it didn't depend on whether the children rented out the property. They could rent it out, they can live in it, it didn't matter. And this principal residence exemption was unlimited. $5 million, $10 million, it makes no difference what the value of that principal residence was. You simply got to transfer the tax basis. And in addition to this unlimited exemption for the transfer of the principal residence, the law allowed an exemption for all other real property up to $1 million. Okay, so those were the two big exemptions for transfers to children, grandchildren. Now, which started as of February 16th, starting February 16th, the rules are now different. So under Prop 19, the parent to child exemption is only if the property continues as the family home of the child or grandchild. The child has to continue to live in it as the principal residence. And I mean, before, if you just inherited your property or got it from your dad, it didn't matter what you did with it as long as it was your dad's principal residence. Under the new rule, you have to live in it as your principal residence. And by the way, the word, when I say transfer here, it can mean a sale, but it doesn't have to mean sale. It could mean just receiving through gift or inheritance. And additionally, the $1 million general exemption for all other real property, that's just gone. It's eliminated. So you don't get that advantage anymore. Okay. Let's see here. So just let's see if I can see some of these questions. If you inherit a property that is a rental, can the heir move in and retain the tax basis? No, because it's not the principal residence of the parent. So it has to be the principal residence. Is Mello-Roos reduced by Prop 19? I'm not really sure if there's any impact on Mello-Roos. I haven't seen or read anything like that. Okay, so anyway, let me continue. So that's sort of the juxtaposition between the new rules and the old rules. And as I said before, this all applies starting February 16th. Now, if you were receiving the tax benefits of this exemption prior to February, then you are grandfathered in under the old rules. So you don't have to immediately move into your property and live in it if you already have the exemption. Okay, so the next slide is how much will the new taxable value be? So assuming the child gets the principal residence of their parent and then continues to use the property as their family home, then there are two rules. So the general rule is that the tax basis remains the same. That's probably what's going to happen in most cases. However, there is an exception, and the exception has to do with how much higher the value of the property is above the tax basis. So if the value of the property is more than $1 million above the current tax basis, then that tax basis will go up, even if you are using it as a principal residence. So in the case of the new tax, in that case, the new taxable basis will be the value of the new property minus $1 million. So it's the value of the new property minus $1 million. So that's confusing, but that's why I have this example. And so here's the example. So assume the assessed value of the family home is $3 million, but the original taxable value is only $500,000. So that's quite a gap. In fact, the assessed value is more than $1 million over the current taxable basis. So therefore, the taxable basis will increase on transfer. The new taxable basis will be $1 million subtracted from the $3 million assessed value. Therefore, the new taxable value is $2 million. So another way to think about this, probably an easier way to think about this, is instead of going through those calculations, like I just did, you can say that you get $1 million off the current assessed value of the property, but the tax basis will never be lower than the original tax basis. You just get $1 million off the current assessed value of the property. That's basically the easy way to think about this. It's more intuitive, and you don't have to sort of go through those calculations. How is the rule for the parent-to-child exclusion police? They break into your house and demand to see. No, I'm just joking. I think you have to apply for the homeowner's exemption, and they're going to keep, and you have to do that within a year. So if I think I missed that when I look at this previous slide, I missed this last bullet point. The very last bullet point, the homeowner's exemption must be claimed at the time of transfer or within 1 year. So that's the key to, I guess, policing this. You have to do that within 1 year, and you have to sort of continue to do that. And so here I have also for reference a chart, which is just another way of illustrating what I just said. Okay, so I have some common questions here about the intergenerational transfer. And one of the questions is, so let's say there's 4 children inheriting a property. And the question is, do all 4 children have to live in this property? You know, that seems kind of ridiculous. That's what the law says. And we have a letter from the chief counsel of the Board of Equalization who has weighed in on this. It's still just an opinion. It's still not definitive, but almost certainly this will be the answer. And the answer is no, that's ridiculous. Only one of the children has to live in the property. So that's almost certainly going to be the answer. And the second question is, and this is a big question, also answered by the chief counsel in his opinion, does the property lose the favorable tax treatment if the child/grandchild stops using the property as a family home? And The answer there is yes, you do lose the favorable tax treatment. You have to, someone has to continue to live in that property as a principal residence and claim the homeowner's exemption year after year after year. Again, it's not 100% definitive, but this is almost certainly going to be the answer. Somebody wants to see the chart again. Here is the chart again. So I think we will send out this PowerPoint to everybody. So you're going to get this. Now, I was talking with Tammy before, and she told me that in Ventura, there are still a lot of farms. So I think when I spoke with the agents in Los Angeles, I didn't bother with this slide, but I guess I can bother with it here. So in addition to the principal residence exclusion for transferring between the parent and child, there's also an additional family farm exclusion. So that wasn't in the law before, but part of Prop 19 was to help family farms. And so this is a new exclusion for family farms. And one of the questions posed is, in order to claim the family farm exemption, does the child actually have to live on the family farm? And the answer here, according to the chief counsel, is no. And again, that's not set in stone, but almost certainly that will be the reason. I mean, frankly, it's a very easy question because there's nothing in Prop 19 which requires the child to live on the family farm in order to claim this exemption. Okay, and another intergenerational question which comes up quite a bit is trusts. Can the transferor of a primary residence be the trustee of a trust? And the answer again is almost certainly yes. This is a rule that's probably going to carry over from the previous rules. And the same is going to be true even of the portability. So can the transferor of a primary residence be the trustee of a trust? And the answer I have listed below is basically cut and paste from the Board of Equalization in regard to Prop 60, but this is almost certainly going to be the answer for Prop 19. Okay, so having a trust is, the test is whether you're the present beneficiary of the trust, and if you are, then basically you can keep it in the trust or transfer it through the trust. The trust is not an impediment to claiming these tax savings under Prop 19. Now, as I said, this is kind of speculative, so most of this is not set in stone. I apologize for that. I wish it was much, much more definitive. But the fact is, when they write these types of propositions, they're not going to use 10 or 20 pages to write the proposition, and that's what it would have taken. I've seen the implementing legislation, and it goes on and on and on and on, and there's just no way that could have been fit into a proposition. Maybe it could have, but that would have been a big problem with its passage. Okay. Now, finally, you might be wondering how you convey the good news of Proposition 19 to your clients. Well, CAR has some client-facing marketing materials that you can use to inform your clients. You can go to this website, and there are a number of things. We have flyers, quick guides, Q&As, and there's even a video and some social media marketing materials. And I can tell you I was the one who is responsible for reviewing these items for legal accuracy and risk management. And I kept running into the same problem. I kept having to correct the same issue. The people in the marketing department, they just love saying that the homeowner gets to transfer their tax basis. And that could be true, but the problem is that if you're buying a property of greater value, then you are not actually transferring your tax basis. You're transferring an adjusted and increased tax basis. It's not exactly the same thing. You're definitely obtaining the savings, but it's not the same as the tax basis. So anyway, these are the kind of marketing materials that we have, and you can go to this. If I go back, it's this website, and you can find this information. So some more questions we have here. Does the no on the farm, does it apply to a farm only with no home on the property? That's right. It doesn't have to have, it doesn't matter whether there's a home on the property or not. The family farm exclusion simply applies to a family farm, regardless of whether there's a principal residence on it or not. It's in either way, you don't have to live on that property. And is it true you can skip a generation? Mother must transfer to daughter or son and not. And the answer there is, we don't really like to talk about this because of the wording of the law, but you can skip a generation, but only if all of the children have passed away, so that you can only, yeah, I mean, basically the parents have, the children of the grandchildren have to have passed away. And then in that circumstance, you can skip a generation. Okay, oh, so that's, what did I do here? I messed up. Oh yeah, okay, so anyway, that's the presentation, and that's it.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. I hope that helped everyone get a better understanding. I think it would have helped me realize even more, which I already knew, was have your clients contact their CPA and or legal counsel for tax advice, because this is a big issue and we are not qualified to give them advice on this. So it's good to know, and it's good for us to understand the process, but we certainly would not advise our clients on this process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that will be concluding our meeting. We appreciate so much having Robert and Gov with us, and I think Gov had to jump off. He had a call, that another meeting he was going to, but we want to do one last thank you to our sponsors, and we'll put the screen up there so you can see them again. First American Home Warranty, First American Natural Hazard Disclosure, Formatic, Property Management, and Guild Mortgage. Thank you so much, and thank all of you members for being here. We hope you gained value from this presentation, and we look forward to many more great presentations throughout the year. We have our general membership meeting coming up too, don't we, Wendy? Isn't that, when's it on my calendar here? I'm impromptu speaking off the cuff right now, so I'm getting off the...
Yeah, no problem. It's actually next Wednesday. So it's Wednesday, April 14th, and it's at 1 o'clock.
1 p.m.
Yep, make sure you register. You can find the link on our calendar, vcrealtors.com. Click on the calendar and event tab and look for the 14th at 1 o'clock. And we hope to see you there.
Yeah, that'll be another good one too. Fair housing is the focus on that one, and also some updates about CRMLS. So I know you all want to know more and have questions, and our MLS is very important to you. So this will be a good opportunity for you to hear from Art Carter at CRMLS as well. So don't miss that meeting next week. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you all soon.